Hello and welcome to Chat ENG. This is my post-match reaction to England's win over Serbia last night. Obviously a great start, winning, keeping a clean sheet, and it really sets us up to hopefully comfortably qualify from the group. My overview of the game: we started well, we kept the ball really well without really doing anything too dynamic with it. We just retained possession really well for the first, I'd say, 10-15 minutes of the game, and starved Serbia of any oxygen that they needed to start a fire. And I thought we controlled the game without being fantastic. And there was one really good bit of play by Saka, and obviously Bellingham arrives late and scores a fantastic header, quite an old school type goal. But there wasn't chance after chance. It wasn't like we were all over them, but I thought we controlled the game well for the first probably half an hour. And we stopped doing the basics well. I think after half an hour we didn't keep the ball as well. I think our choice of pass wasn't as good. We faded a little bit, and in the second half Serbia were probably the better team. Obviously Kane has that chance, which well, it wasn't even a chance, it was just a really good header, and the keeper saves it onto the bar. England still had the best chances in the game. I thought Serbia, for all the fact they had, they huffed and puffed and were the better team in the second half. I can't think of one notable chance that they had, really. The shot from Vlahovic, which was a extraordinary shot, really, because everything about that was wrong. Like his body shape, he was moving away from the ball. The angle of it wasn't on. It was a brilliant effort, but it's from distance, and it's a good save by Pickford. But you'd expect him to save it. And the thing that we stopped doing well was we didn't keep the ball very well. Whenever we had possession, and we had, I think in the second half, partway through the second half, we just started to get the ball a little bit again, and we started to knock it about a little bit. And I think that then led to Kane's chance, actually, if I remember rightly. We just needed that. We just needed to get our foot on the ball and pass it about, because if they haven't got the ball, if you're 1-0 up and your opposition can't get the ball, they can't score, they can't hurt you. And that's what we failed to do in the second half in particular. There's a bit of a narrative around England and Southgate in that, on the BBC yesterday, like we've retreated and we've camped in our own half, and we've been defensive in the second half. If you look at the starting positions, they did a graphic where they saw the starting positions in the first half, starting positions in the second half, or average position, should I say, of the team. It was further back in the second half, but you've got to give it context. But we're 1-0 up in the first game of a major tournament, and we're up against decent opposition, not brilliant, but decent opposition. And we probably did retreat a little bit, but I think the narrative around it is like we were absolutely hanging on for dear for our lives, and I don't think we were. I think, as I say, Serbia had one decent shot from 25 yards out. It's, the thing is, there's a bit of a pantomime thing with England. It's like you're either up there or down there with the media. And the way that they described the first half an hour as if we'd played like prime Spain in 2008. We didn't. We just did okay, and we kept the ball well. And then the way they described the last hour of the game is that we were absolutely terrible. Again, we weren't. We just didn't play as well. You could draw a different narrative and say we were under the cosh a little bit, but whilst being under the cosh, what chances did Serbia have? Going into the tournament, everyone's concern is the defence. The defence stood up really well. And Serbia's biggest strength is their attack, and they have some good players. Tadic obviously came off the bench. Mitrovic is a handful for anybody. Vlahovic, top class player. Jovic, I think, came on. These are really good players. And people will say, oh, if you're up against France or whoever, you're not going to be able to play like that against them. No, you're not. But we weren't up against France. We were up against Serbia, and against who was in front of us, which was a decent team, we did what we needed to do. So I think we just need to be not too high and not too low. How often do you see a team that wins a tournament start off with a defeat or a draw or a poor performance? It's not like in international football you get a team that romps the first game and goes and dominates the tournament. That can happen, but rarely. I'm not saying we are going to win the tournament. I don't think we will. I think you just got to give it some perspective, and also the fact that I bear in mind that the hype around England for me is unfair because we haven't got the players that again, the narrative out there says we have. We're an all right team, and yesterday showed that. So you can't live up to hype that really isn't warranted, or it's very difficult to anyway. Bellingham, I just want to talk about him. He was good, particularly first half. He got the goal. He's a talismanic figure. He's the leader in the team. He's the captain without the armband. The fact he's 20 is just, I just can't believe he's 20 years old. I keep hearing coming into the tournament that he's overrated. He's England's best player by some distance. And it's not just what he does on the ball. I think it's his character, it's his persona, it's the way he carries himself, his body language, the way he drags his team along. I think he probably is a little bit full of himself. I think he does play to the crowd a little bit. But he's 20 years old for a start. Think about yourself when you were 20. You might be that age. But if I think about myself when I was 20, geez, I certainly wasn't as mature as he is. And he's had a lot come to him quite quickly in his life. And he's trying to take it all in. I think we need to give the kid a break. If he acts like a bit of a dick sometimes, so what? He's 20 years old and he backs it up. That's the big thing. He does it on the pitch. So when he does the whole, like, he's riling the crowd up and he bangs into that lad, yeah, that's all for show, but did he play well? Did he get us the winning goal? Yeah. So therefore, so what if he acts up a little bit? He's a top player. He took so many hits last night as well. And he's going to be targeted throughout the tournament. But he's the best player England have had for a long time. And we need to treasure him, and embrace that. In terms of standouts, I thought Gay at the back was really, really good. Very solid. Used the ball well. Stood up to the physical challenge. John Stones did well. Again, stood up to the physical challenge really well. Thought he played well. Rice was good. Very understated. Rice does a lot of the hard yards. Does a lot of the dirty work. Seems to always be in the right place at the right time. I really like Damien. I really like Declan Rice. That's a different Rice. And I thought he was good yesterday. And obviously Bellingham, probably the standout. Foden, a bit disappointed with Foden because I thought he was poor yesterday. And you could say, well, he shouldn't be playing on the left, he should be playing in the centre. You've got to do, when you get the ball and you've got the talent he's got, you've got to just do what you do well, wherever you're playing on the pitch. And he didn't. And I think the difference between world class and just being a top class player is that when you're world class, like Bellingham is, he could play for Dortmund and run the show. He could play whoever's around him because he's so good. He could play for Birmingham City and run the show, whoever's around him, because he's so good at 16. You can go to Real Madrid and score 20 odd goals, and the people around you are obviously better there. But you can play for England and you're still running the show because you're so good that whatever team you play in, your levels above anybody else and your levels are strong and your standards are great. Foden's used to being part of a Man City team where even the defenders make the opposition scared. So playing 90 minutes against Man City must be absolutely horrific for most teams because they'll just grind you down. They're capable of scoring 5 and 6 against probably, I'd say, 15 or 16 teams in the Premier League. They could do that too. So Foden's part of that every week, where the volume of top players he's got around him means that occupies the opposition, and he's going to find pockets of space. He's going to get on the end of things, and he's a brilliant player. But can he translate that then into an England team, which is nowhere near as good as City, and he might not be playing in his preferred position? You've still got to do your job well, and it was 5-10 yard passes that he wasn't making. He cut a frustrated figure. I don't think he looked happy on the pitch last night. And in the past, people said, you've got to build your team around him. In England, with Southgate, you've got to play him. You can't have him on the bench because he's such a talent, and he is a talent. But I think there's a bit of a question mark there, and Gordon, with what he brings, could come in and maybe fit more naturally in that position. He's not a better player than Phil Foden. He's not even close, but he might just suit what we need better at the moment. And then Foden's got to come into the tournament, because there's no doubt he can light it up. He's a superb talent, but he was quite poor last night, and I think that's not picking on the lad. I just think it stood out a little bit to me, and I want to see more from him, because I know he's capable of it, whether he's playing on the left, in the middle, wherever. And England need him. They do. Just a comment on the fans. I think in recent tournaments, probably not the Euros last time, because it was a home tournament and it was the back end of lockdown, so it was a bit weird. So I'd probably exclude that. But in Russia, especially in the early stages, I don't think we had a lot of fans out there. England fans weren't particularly well represented out there. In Qatar, I don't think there was loads. Whereas we've always gone in huge numbers, tens of thousands to tournaments, and by all accounts, it was 40,000 in. I can't say the name of the place. So let's just say Schalke, because that's who play there. There was 40,000. I'm not sure in the stadium, because the stadium's not all that big, but there's 40,000 England fans in and around the stadium, and that's the loudest national anthem I've heard with England for a long time. It's just really good to see. I think the more fans we have out there, more it feels like a home tournament, and that can only help us. So moving on, do you know what? Yesterday I was thinking about it. I thought a draw wouldn't be the end of the world last night, but the problem would be the narrative that goes with that draw, which we know what the media is like, we know what fans are like. All of that negative noise could stifle any momentum that we potentially would need to get. Well, we're not going to get momentum from a draw. So in the context of a group that you're probably going to get out of anyway, a draw wouldn't have been a bad result, but it's the knock-on effect of it. So we won the game, which is great. We didn't play particularly well, and I'm sure, I haven't looked this morning, but I'm sure there's probably, last night already, there was people kind of unhappy about it. But we've won the game, so we've got 3 points already. It gives us a real insurance policy, a cushion, in a group where we probably only need maybe another couple of points to qualify. And as much as a win's great, it puts you in kind of a weird position. And I hope I can explain this in a way that makes sense. When you've won, there's kind of not as much jeopardy in the next game. And England aren't historically a team that plays when there's no pressure on them and just goes and does fantastically well and builds momentum in a tournament. It's almost like, well, if we don't need to win, we'll change the team loads, or not necessarily against Denmark, but perhaps Slovenia. And because the motivation doesn't have to be quite as high psychologically, maybe it's great that we've won and we've got the insurance policy, but in terms of growing into the tournament, if that motivation isn't quite the same, we know that England aren't good enough to play without that full pelt motivation. Even when we're at full pelt, we're not brilliant. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it gives a different dynamic, let's put it that way. The only time I remember England playing exceptionally well because it was the right thing to do rather than because they needed to, having already pretty much qualified from a group, was the Euros in '96, when I think we needed a point against Holland, and we didn't just beat them, we absolutely destroyed them. But that built momentum for the tournament, and that's what I'd like to see from this. Whether we've got 3 points or not, I want us to see us get better against Denmark and then get better against Slovenia. But if you don't have to, that can sometimes hold you back. It's a very long-winded way of saying that, I'm aware. So Denmark on Thursday. It wouldn't surprise me if Gallagher came in. It'd be interesting to see if we can just be a little bit more progressive in our football with the ball, because what we did well last night in the first part was we kept it, but we didn't do a lot. I forgot to mention Saka, actually. Saka was really good in the first half. He was unplayable in the first half. We've got to get those cogs working together better as a more dynamic unit. I've said before the tournament, Kane. I don't know. I don't see it with Kane. He nearly scored with a great header, but I just think he holds everything up. I don't think he's quick enough. I don't think his positional play is that good. He didn't drop deep as much last night, but then he was just stood up front, not really causing any problems. When you've got a team like Serbia who are physical, aggressive, and pretty well organised, just having a pretty static centre forward who's lethal in front of goal, your build-up play is affected by it, and I think we need more fluidity up front. There's no way he's going to bring Kane out of the team. He'll never do it unless he's injured. But I don't think he's great for the creativity of the team, and I'd like to see evidence to the contrary of that in the next game against Denmark. How can we progress? How can we be better, more fluid going forward? But a win's a win, and we've got 3 points. So hopefully, it's coming home.